And we are live. JT here, and welcome to the huddle. The huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focused on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. Been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. We first had the opportunity to meet at an event earlier this spring. And then just through our conversations, we had a great lunch in the summer and just really wanted to learn more about her journey to greatness, what's brought her here, how it's shaping the amazing work she's doing today. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as the Director of Research and Evaluation with Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment at Launchpad. My guest in the huddle today is Marika Warner. How are you today?
Hi JT, I'm great. How you doing?
Great, great. You know what? Being able to be here, sitting here with you, reminds me that, when we can be in the presence of another great human being, life's pretty good.
Indeed.
Okay. Okay. So Marika, before we get kicked off, I want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, it's a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find the days where I'm most consistent, I'm most intentional, most focused on counting my blessings. I do find those days are filled with a little bit more love, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace. And I'm a big believer that the biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So just want to thank you for blessing us with some of your time and energy, especially during this in-demand time in the fall. So thank you again.
Yeah, likewise, JT.
Okay. Okay. Uh, so Marika, I had a good friend and a coaching colleague that will always remind me that, we all have these things that make us unique and different. Our responsibility is to learn how to celebrate them. So I'm curious, sport has obviously played an important role for you in your life. I'm curious, what's an interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
Okay, so entering adulthood, I would say that my sports skills were very poor. So I grew up a dancer, gymnast, did some cheer, so very athletic, performing at an elite level in said sports.
Mhm.
However, given that that is what occupied the majority of my time, I spent very little time handling balls, throwing, kicking. These types of skills were really underdeveloped for me. So now, I find myself much later as an adult in the sport industry, and there are expectations that I can jump on the court, toss a football around with my colleagues, play a game of bump. And I really had a learning curve to address there coming into my job, which is sort of one that you don't think of, but it really reinforces for me how important physical literacy is and
Mhm.
how physical literacy can support positive outcomes across the board relating to social capital, education, employment attainment, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm still working hard to improve my sport specific skills, especially when it comes to throwing, catching, kicking, all of that.
I love that. I appreciate you being so open and honest with us. And it's interesting that as you share that, is that not a great reminder that as leaders, we can always choose to have an open mind, we can always be open vessels, and we can sort of always embody that sort of white belt mentality, that beginner mindset.
Love that. Yes.
Okay, okay. So I'm curious. As I was sharing with you during our lunch, my daughter has also come from that sort of elite level gymnastics, dance background. I'm curious, was there anything like as because now you have a perspective where you're dealing with lots of people who have different interests and passions in sport. Did you find that sort of that dance background, that gymnastic background gave you, um, I don't know, I'm curious, how did that inform what you're doing today?
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I tell this to younger folks all the time that everything is career capital. Like all of the experiences that you're having are in your backpack as career capital. So I think there are a lot of times when young people can say, "Oh, I'm not going to include that coaching experience on my resume," or "Oh, okay, I was on that team, but that's not really relevant to this job that I'm applying for." So I always encourage them, keep it on the resume. This stuff matters when you're coming into a sports space as a professional, having had that community experience. So, I didn't just dance, I taught for many years, was a choreographer, the whole nine, taught to many different populations. So, coming into work for MLSE in the corporate social responsibility business, really had an understanding of what community programming can look like at its best, just different frontline issues that I might not I wouldn't have had a perspective on if I hadn't have had that experience. And, I think dance is more and more seen as a sport. Um, Over the last several years, it's moved more into that direction, like with the aesthetic sports really, I think, growing in popularity and attention. So dance does come up from day to day, from time to time here in my role at MLSC, whether it's working with the Northside Crew, the Raptors Dance Squad,
Mhm.
or programming a dance program in collaboration with a national ballet here at Launchpad. It's been valuable to have someone with that background and experience on our team. I've even had the opportunity to, sort of like lead dance-based warm-ups for large events and things like that. So it definitely comes in. And then for me, I think our early sports really do inform who we become. So, myself, I pride myself on being a poised individual who handles myself with a lot of grace. And obviously, that all comes directly from being a ballet dancer for many, many years. So wouldn't give up that background for anything. As important as my later education experiences were, I that was such a solid foundation for growth.
Mm. And by the way, you're an amazing teacher. I think if anyone can encourage me to get up and get myself out of my comfort zone and like dance, movement, that is completely outside of my own comfort zone. So just in the fact of the way I think of just being a participant as you were leading, you had this great way of just inviting people to try it out. We're gonna break this down. And I think of, Beyonce's Texas Hold'em. My wife and daughter cannot believe still that you got me up to do that in a group setting, but you're a wonderful teacher at that.
Love it. Love it. Yes. And yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's a real test. I think for coaches too, like teaching but like 20 girls in a dance studio is one thing, but leading a group of community members with no dance experience or, you know what I mean, through a piece of choreography is a whole different challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious. So obviously sport has played an important role for you in your life. You've had different opportunities to lead in different areas of sport. So it's obviously very evident that sport has played an important role for you in your life. So I'm curious, currently serving as the director of research and evaluation. I'm curious, what inspired you to pursue this adventure at this stage of your life journey?
Yeah. Okay. So after dance, well, at the same time as dance, really, it was a significant overlap. I became a physical therapist quite pretty young. So I knew that that was something that could coexist with dance. I'd be able to do it part-time, sort of supplement my dance income because it is really hard to make a living as a full-time dancer. So I was doing sort of freelance dance work, doing a lot of music videos or short-term contracts with different dance companies, different shows here and there. And then I was also doing physiotherapy, which was really great. However, being a very curious and very analytical person, I sort of started getting not just bored, but sort of restless in my physiotherapy role. I felt really penned in by that role. And I felt like I was working in stroke rehab. So, here comes another body that's suffered a stroke. And here I am, do these things, get it in pretty good shape, but then send it off down the assembly line, sort of was the feeling that I ended up having. Although I made meaningful connections with my patients and clients, I felt like I could do more by engaging some of my analytical skills. And I was very interested in research. So as a physio, started getting involved in different research studies where I would be doing different assessments while a certain test intervention was being researched. And I would be doing different assessments to see like, okay, has this person's movement skill changed? Where are we at in the stages of recovery, et cetera, based on how they're responding to the treatment that was being explored or studied. So then I started actually delivering the research treatments, which just like was a whole interesting level of rigor to my practice where it had to be delivered in a really certain way and recorded really painstakingly because, so I was starting to learn really how to do research in that setting. At that time, I was also trying some really novel things with some of my patients that I thought were working, but I had sort of anecdotal evidence to go off of there. Like, well, it worked for so and so, but I really wanted to understand if it really worked at scale. So that's when I decided to go back to my master's in rehab science at U of T to really test out some of my ideas and actually really learn how to do research in with mentorship from a very experienced researcher. And so that's the experience that I had. Coming out of that, I wanted to work more in public health, population health. I
Mhm.
ended up in the community health center setting, which was an awesome place for me. My perspective is really informed by the social determinants of health, which is a lot of the framework that community health centers are based around. So I was able to not just deliver physiotherapy services, but design a sort of an overall program of care that included, group-based interventions and collaborations with the nutritionists and social workers. And it was a very holistic focus, which is awesome. Then this role came up at MLSE. I was actually on Hawaii on a surf trip. That's another physical activity passion of mine. And when this job opportunity came through in my inbox, and I freaked out. It was already past the deadline. I hadn't checked my work email for a few days because I was in Hawaii at surf camp. So immediately got on the computer, put my application together, emailed every contact I could find to beg them to look at my application after the deadline, and ended up getting that role. And I have been with MLSE now for just over 8 years, entering my ninth season now as we kick off this fall with the Leafs and Raptors.
Awesome. Well,
Mhm.
I love that. And it's interesting, right? And I think what's learning about your journey, just hearing you describe that, you obviously have this creative side of you. I assume from the dance, the gymnastics, the ballet, like there's this part of you that's creative and just seeing again how you teach and how you lead, you can tell like creatively you like to express yourself. But then how you also mention how you have this analytical side, like this ability to like the rigor. So it's interesting, like it sounds like this role really was well suited to you because it sort of took in these what can feel very different parts of you, but sort of allowed you to use in one role. Is that, have you found that from your experience? It's kind of brought your two worlds together?
Absolutely. And that's why it keeps me engaged. And I think keeps me so excited about my job, which is a fantastic place to be in. And I would say, the things that I've really been passionate about and really connected with in my life, like I'll point out dance, I'll point out sort of program evaluation and community-based research, which I do for a living. And then I'll point out baking, which is sort of my side hobby and passion. These things all combine those two parts. Like a dancer is an athlete plus an artist, right?
Mm,
A community-based researcher or a program evaluator is a scientist plus an artist in a lot of ways. You're
mm,
storytelling at the same time as you're really using data to drive the story. You can't really do one without the other. You have to understand that overall narrative. And then baking is really part science and part art as well, where you're embellishing on it creatively, embedding your individuality in what you're making, but at the same time, it needs to be done a certain way. You need to understand the principles of how acids combine with bases and how these reactions happen and what temperature is needed. So yeah, I guess that's a through line for me that pops out is the having bringing those two sides of the brain together is what it's all about.
mm. It's interesting as you shared those like examples from your life
Yeah.
because it really started to understand what, where your energy and enthusiasm for life comes from is this either or mentality, which we're sort of programmed and very often to condition and live by. You very much have this and, well, can I do this and this and this? So it's interesting. So I'm curious, has that been that sort of and that yes and the improv mindset? Is that something that you've naturally had, or was there like a great teacher, coach, mentor, parent that sort of helped you to understand like the beauty of living with a yes and mentality?
I think it's come naturally over time. I think being in a field like ballet or like science, when you're seen as sort of like that person, it can be there's an expectation that you're going to sort of like fit between the lines, do things the way that they're supposed to be done, focus on the numbers, focus on the objective changes that you can see. So I think for myself, it's just been experimenting with that more subjective side, the more creative side. And I had some experiences, I think that opened that up for me too. Talking about career capital and all your experiences are valuable. I spent some time when I transitioned out of dance, like a lot of athletes, I experienced sort of like a gap where I was no longer performing and I missed that. And it really left something missing for me. So I went into acting, even though I wasn't really passionate about that, but wrote some plays, performed in a lot of plays, did some film work. So I think that probably opened up a lot of my creative energy as well, which I've then been able to bring into my career moving forward.
Awesome. Well, it's great to see, and again, now it's like it's interesting as you explore people's journey, you start to understand, you know, one of the keys to living a rich and fulfilling life is living with that yes and mentality, right? Finding out where that unique intersection between your interests and passions and skill set and everything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Don't be too quick to decide who you are and what you're about.
yeah. So I'm curious, during your time here, like you said, you're going on to your ninth season. Love that. I love just the sports analogy there. Over the time during your 9 seasons, has there been work where you're like, okay, like this is really where my heart is right now. This is the type of work I need to be, dedicating my time and energy to. I'm curious.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of times it comes down to, so we have MLSE Launchpad, which is our sport for development facility, sort of the flagship corporate social responsibility of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. That's down at Dundas and Jarvis in Toronto. JT, we've hosted you here a number of times. So when I get to do projects that really connect with the community at Launchpad, that I find really feeds me, especially when we can then connect it with the larger corporate enterprise in a way and sort of bring those two worlds together where it's very community grounded. It's something that the people here, the youth here, coaches here care about and get why it's important. And at the same time, I can communicate to my boss, couple levels up. I can communicate to a VP or executives the importance of the project and have it resonate with them as well. It's when we can sort of, yeah, make that Venn diagram really live in a
Mhm.
project.
Well, it's interesting. You were mentioning a few minutes ago about this idea of like corporate responsibility, social impact. So I'm curious, from your experiences, why do you think sport is such an important vehicle as a way to where, a big organization like, Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment can, be corporate responsible, but then also use sport as a vehicle to create social change? I'm curious from your
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah, and JT, there's a ton of evidence around that too. So I'll try to bring in the two sides, right? So on the evidence base, if you look at the sport management literature and the general management literature, like business journals, you'll see that best practice in corporate social responsibility means the corporation doing its community work in a way that connects to what it does to make money as well. So, a sport organization going off and giving out scholarships for I don't know, whatever, something unrelated is not going to resonate. It's not going to be as authentic and meaningful as doing something within their wheelhouse. So that's partly why I think it's so important to use sport as a tool. And then sport, because it connects to so many different outcome areas in life in a very unique way. There's such a strong, inarguable connection to obviously physical health, mental wellness, economic outcomes, just a whole range of social and economic based outcomes that are all very important and that are all experience where communities that we serve, the communities, the demographics that we prioritize experience greater challenges to, educational attainment, to achieving health and well-being, to eventually employment attainment. So sport is just, positioned really to address a lot of issues that are being experienced in communities right now.
Mhm.
And it's fun. So, it's not hard to engage people in it
Yeah.
when done well.
It's interesting that you share that, right? And I love what you shared first, that this idea of, as a organization, right? Like, is it aligned with what you're about, right? Like if you're, if your organization's about community and you're giving back in ways that's to your local community, it's going to resonate, right? With your membership differently. Um,
Mhm.
I really love how you're talking about this idea of sport, of just being a connector. So I'm curious, one of the questions we get, especially in a sport like football, which can be a polarizing sport, right? I think people see for better lack of term, the controlled violence at times on the field there.
Mhm.
So what's the research telling us about sport? Like, are more people being physically active? Is it certain communities that are, being more active? Like based on the research that you've done, if we specifically reference, the Change the Game research, what's the data telling us?
Yeah, yeah, happy to get into that. So Change the Game Research Project, this is a 3-year data project my team has been engaged with, launched in 2020, 2021 during the pandemic, just to really get an understanding of how the picture of youth sport access, engagement, and equity at that time. And then we've continued to track over the next few years to really see what's changing. So we're pretty well positioned to speak to that right now. So what we've seen is really a strong growth post-pandemic, seeing a ton of girls get engaged and get more engaged and get engaged in our traditional or our 4 core sports, as we call them at MLSE. That's football, hockey, basketball, and soccer. So just that girls' participation continuing to ramp up. So then we see a lot of consistent challenges with certain populations. So low-income youth continuing to experience strong barriers. Black youth continuing to experience barriers to participation as well. Indigenous youth, non-binary youth is a population that we see continuing to experience some significant barriers as well around inclusion. And some changes that we've seen recently in the data is the Greater Toronto Area and Northern Ontario, within Ontario, sort of really popping as intense pockets of need where
Mm.
more barriers are experienced as well, where youth have less access to sport engagement. And then that 19 to 29 age group. So we looked in this study at about 25,000 youth all the way from age 6 to 29. And that age group concerns me, where we see a fall off, where maybe they're no longer at school, or they don't have access to programs, or their parents aren't paying for them to attend a program or go to a gym. So that access tends to drop off completely. And that has gone up over the last couple of years as well, which I would probably hypothesize connects to cost of living in Toronto and across the country really, but within Ontario, and challenges of affordability when it comes to accessing sport and physical activity.
Mm. I appreciate you kind of sharing, so what it's finding. So it sounds like accessibility, right? Affordability. It's just certain, you know, parts of our geography. Ontario is very diverse, very large landmass. It
Mhm.
sounds like accessibility is really one of the barriers that's impacting a lot of communities right now. Is that, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, newcomer population is another one that has really popped in the last year of data as well, where youth who aren't born in Canada are experiencing much greater barriers to engagement for a variety of reasons.
Hmm. Hmm. So I guess, I know we've talked about some of this stuff in the past. I find it interesting because again, being a administrator in a sport like football, which inherently is a late specialization sport, right? Like most people don't, it's not historically has not been the first sport they enter in. So I guess the question I have is what is creating these accessibility issues? Like I know one thing, for example, as we plan out 2025, just the climate here, we're trying to get indoor facilities. Again, that's challenging, one, for lack of facilities, but then two, cost. Like are those ones that are many sport organizations are up against?
Yes, 100%. Infrastructure is a huge driver of challenges with access. So the less spaces, indoor spaces we have, the more expensive they are for organizations to book. So now you see organizations being prioritized by owners of facilities or operators of facilities. The organizations that have the greatest revenue that can afford to pay more per hour for those spaces are prioritized.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of spaces are perhaps not being used to their best potential, where you see, we have a ton of city facilities. Those need some work. We could use more of those as well. But what is typically programmed in those is, very introductory learn to play programming for sort of that younger age group that Not to say that nothing positive happens here, but it's not really built around skill development. It's
Mm,
and it really stops. There's a very low ceiling with that type of programming. So
mm,
you see City of Toronto facilities filled with that type of programming, and then we have a lot of school facilities that are being underutilized, where organizations could be accessing, some amazing facilities that we have at a lot of our TDSB schools, but because of different bureaucracy issues, they're not being accessed. And then what we see is, some for-profit sport facilities that, again, community programs or programs that are affordable, and even increasingly just, your average club doesn't have adequate access to, just because of there's just not enough spaces. So that's something as MLSE Foundation that we're really looking to address over the next couple of years. We will be making some more significant investments in sport infrastructure for the GTA, and potentially collaborating with some other organizations to improve and refurbish and sort of change the focus of what their facility provides.
mm. So I'm curious, as anyone, in the visits I've had down to Launchpad, the one thing I love about it, I think it's connected to sort of change the game research, is it's a safe space. It's an
Mhm.
inclusive space. I even love just the messaging on the wall, right? It feels very, there are a lot of reminders of personal growth, self-development, just, bettering yourself, for better
Yeah.
lack of term. Um, what have you noticed as you have helped to lead and create these safe spaces, these inclusive spaces where, we can get more young people just physically active? What have you noticed?
Mhm. And I'm thinking back to a research project we did a few years back. It was called the Place Study. So we did sort of walking focus groups where we brought youth around, and this is when we were first starting to think about scaling what we do. So it's first starting to think about, maybe it's time to open another launch pad. So we really wanted to understand, like, what is the special sauce of this building? I never want to say secret sauce because we don't want to keep it a secret. We want to share it with the world so others can replicate and transfer those learnings. So what's in the special sauce about this place that allows us to achieve some really strong positive youth outcomes? So we walked around with youth, talked about different areas of the space and what they mean to the youth, to sort of better understand, like, how much of that is tied to this place and how much of it could be replicated anywhere. And,
Mm,
it's a balance. Like, we hear that just sort of the condition that we keep our space in means a lot to the youth. Like, if you've been here, we refinish our court, not like it's an NBA court, but not too far behind that level of care to the way our court looks. We keep our facility, our operations team just does a fabulous job making sure when youth walk into this space, they feel that they are in a world-class facility owned by MLSE that's comparable to your Ford Performance Center, your BMO training grounds, your OVO training center. So that is something that's important. And that branding, like having the presence of their favorite sport franchises in the space, sort of really supports youth as well to dream big and really think about
mm,
that bigger tomorrow, while they're living in today. So those things are part of it. And then it's a lot of, pieces of that we built into the facility to create more inclusion. So having mental health supports right in the space. So maybe a youth who is experiencing some of those challenges has extra incentive to come out, or knows that those needs are going to be supported when they're here. Providing one-to-one when we have a youth on the spectrum who needs that extra support in programming. Having a shoe library so that when a youth comes in the middle of winter with only boots, or summer with Crocs and flip-flops,
mm,
they're able to participate. Providing food every day so that hunger or lack of energy is never an issue, preventing youth from getting active on the court. So all these kinds of things contribute to providing that atmosphere that we're looking to maintain here at Launchpad and replicate elsewhere.
mm. It's interesting, and I love how you share that it was sort of like understanding, like you said, what's the special sauce here, right? Why do people keep coming back? I even think, from someone who's visited there, I think the leaders, and yourself included, it's very welcoming. Like, whenever you come there, it's like people, you can tell people genuinely are happy to see you there, and they're very, hey, come try out the space. And I love even simple things like you said, providing food, having a shoe library, like little things like that, which we sometimes, in this first world, sometimes forget that there are some challenges that we sometimes forget. Like, it's important to remember that not everyone is afforded the same, um, the same, necessities, right? So,
That's right. Yeah, yeah. We may not have kids walking around the streets of Toronto barefoot, but that doesn't mean they all have a pair of athletic shoes either. 100%.
okay. So I'm curious. the one thing I do love about the work you're doing is, it's the research, but then it's putting into practice. And that's what I really love about that. It really resonates with me. So, we had an interesting few years, coming out of the pandemic. Now we're here. What do you think from where do you think we go next here in order to make things more accessible? Is it focusing on, providing certain sports? Is it more about, working with our partners like schools to open up those facilities to use them? Yeah, I'm kind of curious, just like how do we get more young people physically active so they can feel happy, healthy, and well?
Yeah, such a great question. So I think it's multi-pronged. I think some changes with how school boards handle their spaces are very much needed, starting in the city of Toronto and then beyond as well, across Ontario and likely beyond, although I don't have a great understanding of the national picture when it comes to that. But yes, we're not using our spaces as well as we could. I think government needs to sort of change how they fund sport as well. I'm not exactly sure what the formula is. I'm working on figuring that out. So let me get back to you. But I think it means more ministries collaborating across, why it just is sport not supported by a Ministry of Health, Labor, Education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there needs to be more sort of collaboration to invest in interventions, which sport is one that can impact all of these areas positively. And, stopping keeping sport sort of over on this little island of sport all by itself, where that holistic impact is not really understood or appreciated or adequately funded. So that's part of it too. I think more corporations need to step up, and that's something that's really important for me in my role. Like I'm a huge sports fan. I keep an eye on all of the leagues, and anytime that we can provide an example, an evidence-based best practice, or help catalyze other professional sport organizations to invest in their communities in more meaningful, sustainable, authentic ways that really do move the needle on youth sport access, that's a huge win for me. So, you have some really great examples. Jay's Care does really fantastic work, and then you have others that could do a lot more. So we're looking to really push, raise the standard, raise the bar for what's expected of a professional sport organization in terms of what it's giving back. And even the leagues have a lot they can do there as well.
Mm. It's interesting as you talk about that because what really came up as you share that was we just need to provide spaces where we can have things even like our conversation today, like meaningful conversation with other leaders. Hey, what are you seeing? How can we help and support each other? Where's the synergy? Where's the collaboration? How can we, essentially affect the most change?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to see more of that. And we try to create sort of these community of practice moments at MLC Launchpad, but that's something that's very much needed in the professional sports sector when it comes to, every team typically has a community or a social impact department, but there's not a lot of communication happening across those organizations, or it happens in sort of roundabout happenstance kinds of ways. So I do think a lot more thought and intentionality could be built into how teams are collaborating across an entire league or even between leagues.
Mm, okay. I'm curious from your perspective, and I sort of want to tap into your research and evaluation, brain here. I'm curious, something like flag football. I know last week there was around the PA Day in Toronto, it's sort of an Argo Day where we got people around movement-based skills, right? Physical literacy. I'm curious, how can we use something like the 2028 LA Olympics, right? Where something like flag football is going to be in the LA Olympics. It's obviously that draws in, that grabs eyes and ears. Right now, you have the NFL that's starting to really get behind it. I guess my question goes to how can we use something like that, like
Mhm.
2028, as really an opportunity just to, how do we best use that as a vehicle to get more people up and moving?
Mhm,
Or even
mhm.
getting more coaches, like getting more leaders, maybe coaching. Like, kind of curious, tapping into your research evaluation brain.
Yeah. So, and you say coaches, so that was one of my top things. And I'm just jotting down a couple notes so I don't miss anything here. But coach education is crucial. So we need to be building coach education programs because if we want programming to grow, we need to have people who are able to deliver that programming. So, and that coach education needs to specifically target diverse young people, so young women, youth of diverse races, non-binary, so that the people that they're coaching can see themselves represented in that
Mhm.
coaching, in those coaches as well. So we need to, there needs to be partnerships between community-based organizations and funding organizations and organizations like Football Ontario to collaboratively build coach education programs that are accessible, that and then provide the support to youth to really be able to complete that and translate it to a meaningful coach role. So, youth need help when it comes to that. A lot of times, coaching can be a first job opportunity for a lot of youth. So
Mhm.
it's not necessarily an easy experience if they don't have a parent to walk them through it or a mentor to walk them through it. So that's a really huge piece. And then I think just like building on the trends that we're seeing. So I said in Change the Game data, we've seen girls in the traditional sports like increase their participation really increase over the last couple of years. And that's true across the board. Soccer and football, we're seeing the same in boys. So this trend is also underway within the sport of football, across genders. So really trying to understand like what is it right now about football and also about soccer that's drawing youth in, and then really trying to build on that. So, maybe a little bit of research, a little bit of data collection, trying to better understand what it is that's attracting youth to the sport so that we can double down on whatever those factors are, would be something that I would see as an awesome next step. And then just working to create funding opportunities, to find grassroots organizations that are offering flag football programming and say, what do you need? Do you want to do a girls only program? How can we better support you to
Mm,
grow and to grow what you're doing in a natural way?
yeah. I love that. And again, it speaks to your sort of like multi-prong approach, right? I love the idea of, coaching, education, development, because I know that's something that, just my lived experience, coming from a background in education, I know there was a lot of reps and sets that I think the longer I've been away from education, I realized that there were just some lessons that were learned through the school of hard knocks that isn't easy to replicate, right?
Mhm.
So now it's important that it's great to have interest and demand, but we also got to empower coaches with the skills so that really at the end of the day, they can sort of just provide the best possible experience, right?
Yes,
For everybody.
exactly. That, yeah, you said it, provide a positive experience that's going to keep youth wanting to come back. That's not going to alienate youth because one bad sport experience can, a sport can lose a youth. And then the other thing I think of too is I know that there are professional flag teams starting to pop up. So can we bring some of that to Canada? Can we provide an exhibition game or, a visiting game? That's always something to get a lot of youth excited
Mhm,
and galvanized around.
mhm, mhm. Very, it's interesting. I love it. And really just the whole idea of what you just shared there was really community focused, right? Okay. Okay. So I'm curious that I know I want to be mindful of your time. What's something you want to see on personal level here from the work you're doing now? What would you say is something you would like to see happen in the next, 2, 3 years within sport that can really help us take this thing to the next level, get more people, really embodying this long-term athlete development, right? Keeping people within sport and being physically active.
Yeah. So, I'll reference back to some of the things I said. We need more infrastructure. We need government to sort of open up its mind about how it's funding sport. And then something I will focus on is I really think that we need to see more community-based role models who are at a high level in sport. Look at the Caitlin Clark effect and the impact that that has had on the WNBA as a league, on the sport of basketball across around the world,
Mhm.
not just across North America. And then I hear from, I recently did a project with the Canadian Olympic Committee, um, looking at barriers to elite sport engagement for racialized athletes. And what I heard from a lot of the athletes that participated in focus groups is that their national sport organization or provincial sport organization just didn't want them to be the face of their sport. So these are diverse young people. So, and that just to me is an area where there's so much potential. Like if we look, you can look at Simone Biles as another example that has, we had black gymnasts before Simone, but her impact on the sport of gymnastics and, racially diverse girls wanting to engage with that sport has been phenomenal. So, having more diverse role models in more sports, really turning our attention to as NSOs, like choosing spokespeople for the sport that are going to speak to young people, that are going to be able to connect with young people and try to, and like kind of understanding that that is such a strong lever, having a role model in your sport that you can see yourself in. So yeah, I think that's an area where we could uh, leverage a lot of change and a lot of interest.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? It's like people to affect change, to give people hope of a brighter tomorrow, you have to show them people, examples like you talked about that are from the communities they're in that might have come from a similar lived experience to show them like this is where, if we're talking sport, this is where sport can take you. This is can help you become this type of person with these qualities and this and create this level of success in life, right? So love
Mhm.
this idea.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Okay. So I'm curious, I know I'm more intrigued. I think through our conversation today, I'm learning more about the great work that, MLSE and MLSE Launchpad is creating. If anyone wants to learn more about, sort of the great work that you're helping to lead, where's the best place for someone to learn more? Or let's say they want to get involved, they just want to help sort of the mission. Where's the best place for someone to start?
So I'll refer you to two places. So MLSElaunchpad.org. There you can find out a lot about what we do at our facility in Toronto. You can find if you're looking for a space to host a sport event, there's a space usage request there. Folks can, get into the space. Even just reach out. We're happy to provide a tour if a group or even an individual just wants to come in and understand what we do. So that's one place to look at. We also have an area on that website where we host a lot of our research papers and things that we've published. So yeah, check that out. Then MLSEfoundation.org. So we're sort of, very parallel organizations. I work for both. At the MLSEfoundation.org website, you'll find out a lot more about our grant opportunities, the different ways that we invest in sport, in youth sport across Ontario, and different ways to get involved and support that as well. So, and follow us on social. Our MLSE Launchpad accounts are more sort of community focused, and you'll see more content from community sport events. Our MLSE Foundation is a little bit more sort of fundraising and industry focused, but both are solid follows.
Okay. And I'll be happy to share out both of those links and social media handles in the description on YouTube or on the podcast.
Thank you.
Uh, Marika, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the great leader you are, the great mom, the great teacher, coach, mentor, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are. Just from this conversation and through our conversations offline, the one thing I've really come to appreciate about you is just this like energy and enthusiasm and passion that you live your life by. And it's really like you're an embodiment of this yes and mentality, right? Of finding this intersection again between your interests, your passions, your skill set, and just really all using them in an interest to help and serve and make this world a better place. So I just want to thank you for reminding me that you always can be a shining light in this world.
Thanks so much, JT. And look, game recognized game. So the same could be said, but really looking forward to further collaboration with you and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just take a moment to receive that. So thank you. So folks, Marika dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's a consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually helps you to create greater results in your life. So, my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, or just someone that you feel would benefit from listening to these positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.